Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this BDS webinar this evening. This evening's subject is a sensitive issue, a difficult issue, an issue that many of us are just coming to terms with. But I'm joined by, I have to say, in my preliminary conversations, a fantastic panel of people with a wealth of expertise and a wealth of knowledge. We're joined by Susie Deely from the Royal Agricultural Benevolent Institute, and Susie will start the session this evening by talking about what the RABI does, followed by Professor Anne Mortimer from the BASC organisation, British Association of Shooting and Conservation, and the kind of help and support you can get there and the signposting. Followed by Helen Benson, who does give her apologies because she's not going to be on video. But I was desperate for Helen not to withdraw because she couldn't get on video, because she sums up some of the problems that we currently face, in that in rural areas and in the outflung areas, there isn't a signal. Sometimes you can't get a phone signal, sometimes you can't phone out for help, sometimes you can't get that comforting phone call. We've got Matt Hubbard from East Anglia, who's representing YANA, or You Are Not Alone. We've also got, we're delighted to have David Quangley from the Campaign Against Living Miserably, otherwise known as CALM. So why on earth would the BDS be picking up such a difficult subject such as this? And I know it's difficult because Nick Rout, who is doing all the magic that makes this system work, and I have been talking and listening to people who actually don't want to come to this session because they don't want to be seen as being vulnerable or interested or perhaps suspect to some mental health issues. And we respect those, and everyone will be able to watch this video privately because it will be available on the website for everyone to see. So it is a sensitive issue. We are in a very difficult, that overused word, unprecedented times. I live in a very rural area. I'm aware of people who are cut off, who don't see people. I'm aware of people who are extremely clinically vulnerable, who are clinically vulnerable, who are having children back at home for 24/7. We've got mental health problems being predicted for young children as a consequence of the lack of socialization. We've got isolation of the elderly, isolation of the young. We've got, sadly, domestic violence, we've got substance misuse, and we've got those financial worries about employment and whether or not people are going to be able to keep their house, whether or not the shoot or the farm is going to make it, with the added delights of Brexit and with potential recessions up and coming afterwards. So we live in an unusual time. And it's fitting for us to just tackle this. And I suspect this might be the first of a number of visits to this very difficult issue as we gain slightly more confidence and greater competence in helping and supporting people. So it's a real good welcome. I've thanked Nick for his work, but we've also got Laura McMahon back at BDS, who also helped us with the logistics, and David McCauley, the CEO. So what I'm going to do is, in the usual way, I'm going to ask Susie if she could just talk to us about what RABI is doing at the moment to meet or to help and support people in rural areas with some of these challenges that we're currently facing.
My name's Susie Deely. I'm a farmer's daughter from Oxfordshire. I work for RABI, the Royal Agricultural Benevolent Institution. Oh, brilliant. We are a national farming charity. We operate across England and Wales, and we've been around for a very long time, since 1860. And we are there to support farming people. So that's farmers, farm workers, and their dependents, and that's whether working or non-working. We help in a number of ways. We provide practical care and also grants. That's what we're traditionally known for doing, whether that's longer term support for those who are retired or have had to exit the industry. We also can give a whole range of one-off grants. We don't support farming businesses, more the domestic situations of the people and the families. But there are a number of ways that we can support them. So, for example, for working farming families, if perhaps there's illness or an accident, we can help with relief staff. We can help clear debt, is, so, for example, utility arrears, any number of things we can do. We've been doing this, as I said, for a very long time, so we're very well connected in the industry and across the rural community. So we always encourage people to pick up the phone and call. If it's not something we can help with, we're almost certainly going to be able to put you in touch with others. But we come from a place where we're looking at the rural community and the farming community in particular for us, and we are in a time of unprecedented challenges. We are being hit left, right and centre with these challenges, and they're having great impacts on people. And we know that we need to do more. We work with, alongside many, many of the other farming support agencies, and we are working hard to continue to work smarter and better with them to make sure that the channels for support are to open to people and that they can get the help that they need. But we as a charity feel that there's a lot more that we need to do. Our vision is that no member of the farming community should ever face adversity alone, and we've got a long way to go to get there. So we've set out a really ambitious 5-year strategy to evolve our services. The first step of that for us was really in response to, we are, like so many organisations, are seeing an increasing number of people with mental well-being difficulties, and it's a widely talked about topic, I think more and more so, and thank goodness it is, and it's across the general population. But we in the rural community, we are not, we're not left out of that. It is everywhere. It's happening to everywhere, and it's happening to everyone. And I think the rural community and farmers in particular, there is this expectation that you just get on and you'll all be fine. But the reality is that we're all have vulnerabilities, we all have difficult times, and actually the strength comes in acknowledging those and to helping and to seeking out that support to build your resilience to go forward. There is a lot of support that's available, and I hope in time there will be much more, but what we really need to do is start normalizing these conversations so that people feel more comfortable to have conversations and can access the support. First thing we did in October last year was we launched, alongside a leading provider, an online wellbeing platform called Quell. It's an existing system that's been around for a long time, but we've worked with them to make it farmer specific. So there's a lot more farming related content on there. It is entirely free to access and it's completely anonymous. And if people go onto our website, which is www.rabi.org.uk, they can gain direct access to that. And we would really encourage people to use it. We are by no means saying that this is the answer. We know that there are big problems with rural connectivity, but for some, it is a really good tool. It's a really strong tool, and particularly those who don't feel ready to perhaps have that one-to-one conversation on the phone or face-to-face. Hopefully this provides some opportunities for early intervention, and it is backed by counselling, professional counsellors. So there's a whole wealth of information on there, from articles, chats, forums, but also, as I said, that people can make appointments with counsellors to talk directly to them, and it is entirely free. So that was the first step for us. But as I said, we're looking to evolve our services. We have no vision to be an enormous charity. This is about really understanding where the need is in the community and then working with existing support agencies, perhaps to help nationalise some support services, perhaps to work alongside them. But as I said, it's not about RABI taking over the world in any way. It is about really trying to make support services more available and the right support services available. So in order to do that, we needed to know where the problems really are. So we launched the Big Farming Survey at the beginning of January, and we are looking for an ambitious target of 26,000 respondents from across the farming community. So that's farmers, farm workers, farmers' partners, adult children, and those retired and involved in the farm. We need to access the whole community across England and Wales, all sectors and all types. And this survey really looks at a couple of different factors. So it's looking at physical and mental well-being, but also the health of farm businesses, so that if we can have a broad base of information and data available to us, which will be published in the autumn. We want the findings to be available to the rest within our sector, so that we can all gain a better understanding of what need looks like at the moment to tailor our services. So for us, it's very much early days. It's an exciting time for us because we really feel like we can make a difference. But a big part of this is about normalising those conversations and keeping the conversation going, because we can have the best support services available. But if people aren't ready to access them or don't know that they're there, then we have, we just need to keep this conversation going so that people understand it's available. I think that's it for me for the moment, but any questions I'm happy to take later on.
I suspect there'll be stacks there. Thanks, Susie. That's a really comprehensive package. And I've learned a lot in the last 4 minutes, which is really interesting. We won't delay it. And if we can move to Anne from BASC, I wonder if you'd like to talk about how you're helping and supporting your membership in the wider rural populations, and your perspectives on the current difficulties it would face.
Okay, it's perhaps worth pointing out that psychiatrists are medical doctors who specialised in mental health, which I started about 40 years ago. And I still work for the National Health Service on a part-time basis, treating quite a wide variety of conditions. Since 2015, when I was first elected to BASC Council, I've been advising particularly on the matters of mental health and firearms. It's something that since I started shooting myself, I began giving talks originally to firearms inquiry officers and also to doctors, just trying to help to educate them about what the issues are, what to do, so that they've got a bit of a bearing on the issue. And the take-home messages of that really are for people who have certificates that getting help is what you need to do to show a responsible attitude. For the authorities, it's that shooting sports are actually quite good for you. BASC's done work in this regard, a survey that showed that there were all sorts of social and other benefits which people had when they were part of a shooting community, making friends, keeping friends, getting healthy outdoor exercise, etc. And obviously a lot of people's livelihood would not be possible if they lost the certificate. So that's something that I sometimes think FEOs don't entirely appreciate, that it adds another layer of consideration in their certification grant decisions. I also advise the BASC Firearms team. We're the only shooting-related organisation which has a firearms team in terms of members in difficulty. One of the things that BASC did was set up a medical panel of members who were doctors in order to verify medical records for people who were applying for grants or renewals. Since the last 5 years, a number of police forces have demanded, in fact, they all now demand, that a GP verifies what people put on their application. And a lot of GPs won't do it, or they charge exorbitant fees, or it takes them a very long time to do it. So for members in difficulty with the GP, BASC provides this service. I also not infrequently get calls from members of the firearms team who have contact with members who are in difficulty with mental health issues, and I do carry out reports on, I would say, maybe 10 members a year, usually successfully, I'm glad to say. BASC isn't really an organisation that majors in mental health. And during the pandemic, we've tried to be useful to our members and reduce stress by providing very, very quick information on what the regulations now are after the government's various changes, of course. We've also provided a lot of material for people with children at home, lots of little educational activities, games, quizzes, all that sort of thing. And BASC regional staff have carried out a great number of shoot visits to show shoot managers how they can be COVID safe. Yeah, generally liaising and keeping in touch with our members. And it's not limited to members, I would say it's the shooting community at large. Regarding getting mental health help, obviously I'm representing the health service as well as BASC. There's a terrific amount of help out there. The health service is just, it's incredible really to compare it with when I started off, in the 1980s. Every area now has a counselling service. It's called Increasing Access to Psychological Therapies, or IAPT for short. You can refer yourself to IAPT, or you can go to your GP. Your GP can prescribe, for instance, antidepressants if you want to take tablets. You don't fancy going and seeing a counsellor for weeks. Antidepressants aren't addictive. You don't have to take them forever. But for me, the first port of call, it's no doubt it will be referred to frequently this evening, is family and friends. It's a support network that you've already got, using the sorts of resources that you bring into play when things go wrong.
That's excellent, thank you, because I think it just highlights some of the issues. And for people, or many people who are in the countryside, the firearms are a key part of their life and their work, and they are just as much a tool as a spanner or a wrench for a mechanic. And it's as important that I think that one thing that's beginning to emerge from here straight away is on the BDS websites, and I'll circulate an email to everyone else tomorrow. I can put your websites and also some of the cues here. I certainly like the normalization of the conversation, Susie, already. I think that's a key phrase that's coming out. But I think RABI's website, and similarly the IAPT services, just so people know what it is. Of course, many people don't have the languages of mental health. We have the language for some of the terrible illnesses that strike us, but we don't have the language for mental health, and we have so much difficulty in expressing that. So thank you. We'll come to Helen, who can perhaps talk us through what she's doing with the Gamekeepers Welfare and Jamie's Line and Hinds and Stags. I have to say it was a marvellous story in the Shooting Times today about the farmer, the gamekeeper, who managed to get across the moors to bring fuel to a stranded house. And we know just how driven people in rural communities can be to help and support one another. So over to you, Helen. How does the Gamekeepers Welfare Organisation help and support people in the rural areas?
Right, thank you very much. First of all, may I apologise for being in the background, but my broadband is so poor that I couldn't do Zoom or anything else. So, the Gamekeepers Welfare Trust, I'll just run very quickly what it is and where it covers. And it's much younger than RABI, it's 30 years old next year, but benevolent institutions and organisations supporting gamekeepers for centuries in one form or another. It was set up to help the elderly, the infirm, and in financial difficulty, and the disabled. So what grants in a similar way to RABI for various things, and one-off grants as well, but over time now those annual grants too, and all sorts of things that are needed. But one of the most important things in recent years has been Jamie's Helpline. That is open 24/7 and is available to gamekeepers, to stalkers, to gillies, that's fishing gillies as well as deer gillies, their families, their dependents, and students as well as those who have left the profession. And it covers a wide range of issues, very much like RABI. The call would be about a different issue than mental health. Very often, it's multi-layered. So it may be that there's been a bad season, it may be that there's a relationship problem, it may be that there's financial difficulties, It may be through this COVID situation that it's caused immense pressure. And of course, in the gamekeeping community, there's an awful lot of worry about redundancy and so on and so forth. And that's as well as the firearms issues that Anne was outlining. We get an awful lot of calls about that. And like farmers, the firearms is very important, but unlike farmers, it is absolutely essential. So if you haven't got a firearms certificate or a shotgun certificate, you very often aren't going to have a job for very long. And it is a huge barrier for seeking help. But like Anne says, seeking help is the first thing that you need to do, and talking to friends and family and going to a helpline, whether it's one of these organisations that we're talking about tonight or any other, that is the most important thing to do. How we are helping through this situation, in recent years we have been developing various other strategies and initiatives. We developed an initiative called Raising the Game nearly 3 years ago now, where all the organisations came on board just really to raise the profile and understand that it is not a stigma, that everybody gets troubles and it's no problem to contact someone and ask for help. We are talking about a mainly male-dominated profession who are immensely proud and stoical, very much like farmers and other rural occupations. And it is very difficult for them to accept that they need help. But hopefully we are reaching through and making people understand that everybody needs help sometimes. We have, in addition to our Jamie's Helpline, and liaising with lots and lots of other organisations, and we've been speaking to Jana and speaking to Anne recently about our new initiative where we are actually funding a counselling service in certain circumstances, because we know that people won't go to the doctor. So if they can get counselling when they need it, that can help to alleviate difficulties further down the line. We have been doing daily tips on through our database and on the website. We have lots and lots of fact sheets on various things, including anxiety and stress. We have our Haynes booklets on for women and for men. We have our gamekeepers packs, which have got all sorts of little things in there, who you're going to call, contact numbers and little tips and helps on how to get through the day when you're feeling a bit low. We contact lots and lots of people, our beneficiaries and people who contact us with little gifts and cards and letters and phone calls. We know the problems that isolation and loneliness can cause, and so we do our best there. Lots of the organisations have helped us in providing magazines. When someone is struggling financially and they're not a member of anything and they're feeling pretty isolated and not part of that community that was so important to them. So the BDS and others have given us some magazines to send out to those who can't afford them. Lots of little things like that, sending sweeties out through these difficult times. Somebody said it was so good to get something that wasn't a bill. Lots of things like that. Our volunteers are out there to help, very much like the RABI, and we work across the organisations with RSABI and RABI and FCN as well, to support people through. So that's about us, I think.
Thanks, Helen. There's some really interesting things came out, and we begin to get some coherence to our talk this evening about organisations to reassure members are working quite closely together and developing packages so that money and effort and resources and brain power isn't going to waste there. So that was really interesting, and you have reminded me that A, we need to get some more BDS magazines sent to you, and B, issues that I have made an effort with and promised to. I will be sending the copy for the link to quite a significant number of MPs, so that they're aware of this kind of work that is going on, and that they're slightly better informed, because there's some areas, even working very closely, that are brand new to me tonight. So without further ado, Matthew, if we can come to you with Jana, we've had national organisations so far, but you're quite regional, I believe.
Absolutely. Thanks, Maurice. So yes, I'm a trustee of Jana, the agricultural and rural business mental health charity for Suffolk, Norfolk and Worcestershire. Our purpose at Jana is suicide prevention. Unfortunately, as a number of you may know, one person in the wider agricultural community in the UK takes their own life every week. We build mental health awareness by a variety of means right across our geography. We also provide training courses on mental health first aid training, and importantly, we also offer confidential support and counselling. We did 400 hours of counselling last year, and what we're finding over the last couple of months is that calls to our helpline have increased. I think that I'd add that we recognise, as others have mentioned, that there are a range of causes that underpin mental health challenges, but problems are rarely unique. And once people have talked about them, you're not the first person usually that has encountered such challenges. Seeking support is vital, but as Anne and Susie have said, and Helen touched upon it as well, it's also about encouraging those who are concerned about others, friends, family, partners, to say something as well. And I think my key message is don't hesitate to say something. That's really important.
Okay, thank you. Now, we've had a degree of coherence amongst those predominantly rural organisations, and I'm absolutely over the moon that CALM has been able to join us this evening, because they have been doing some significantly impressive work. They do have a website that talks about very difficult circumstances and situations, which every time I look at it makes me smile. It's also helped me in some of the additional work that I do. I do a lot of work with homeless military or ex-personnel, and they've picked up and helped me on a lot of occasions with the ability to give advice. So in these difficult and unprecedented times, and you've been quite explicit that you cover the whole of the UK, what is your perspective on the challenge of mental health at the moment, and how CALM can help, and how people can access and be helped by CALM? David, over to you.
Thanks very much, Maurice. It's really great to be able to speak with all of you today and hear from all of the speakers already, Susie and Anne and Matthew. It's fantastic to hear about the support that you guys are providing as well to people specifically in rural areas. It's really eye-opening actually, and really reassuring to hear what you do and the fact that you're striving to do more as well. Just a note in advance, I'm one of the unlucky ones who's had COVID, and I have an ongoing breathlessness from it. So if I'm taking long dramatic pauses, it's not intentional, it's simply trying to get my breath back. So very grateful to the NHS for helping us out with stuff like that. CALM, as Maurice was saying, is a nationwide suicide prevention organisation. So similarly to Matthew, our focus is on suicide prevention. So we are a charity, but we prefer to describe ourselves as a movement against suicide. CALM initially started as a pilot project run by the NHS in the Northwest, but that was in 1997, and after a period of trial runs working within the health department, it turned into a nationwide charity in 2006, and we exist, as I've said, for the sole purpose of suicide prevention. That's where everything comes from. We know that mental health and suicide is a really emotive subject. CALM's approach is relatively unique. We try to focus, we don't focus on the issue negatively. Obviously, it is, as I've said, extremely emotive, but our focus through the work we do is about reasons for living. That's the angle that we take. And there are loads and loads of support services and companion organisations out there, and lots of organisations do fantastic work, and different organisations work for different people. It's the approach that we take, and we find that it works really, really well for a lot of our supporters, and hopefully some of your members will find it good for them as well. So why do we do this? Matthew gave a really important statistic on suicide rates for people in rural areas, which is really shocking. More broadly than that, there are around 6.5 people who die by suicide every year. And when you break that down, it's 125 people per week, which is quite a shocking statistic. CALM itself has traditionally focused on support for men. We're a completely gender inclusive organisation now. Traditionally, that's where our expertise has lied, because 75% of suicides are male. Our support services now are, as I said, gender inclusive, but it's a really interesting and important statistic to keep in mind, I think. We also don't focus specifically on young people, but it is also interesting to note that suicide is the single biggest killer of men under the age of 45 in the UK. So there are some clear demographics there that are particularly at risk in both rural and urban populations. We do a number of things, but our work can be divided into 3 main pillars. They are our frontline services, which I'll talk about in a bit more depth, our campaigning work, which is nationwide, and our grassroots collective work as well. So our frontline services, which have been running since the beginning of CALM, is our free helpline and web chat service, which runs every single day of the year from 5 p.m. until midnight. And it's for anyone who needs to talk about any of life's problems, including people at the point of crisis, so people who are in immediate danger, essentially. But we support people across the spectrum, so someone who might be in immediate danger, but also someone who's simply having a bad day. Not only do we support people across that spectrum, but it's also supporting people on a huge range of issues. So it could be absolutely anything. It could be about addiction, anger management issues, financial troubles, other sorts of mental health issues, abuse, a huge range of issues. The people who work on our helpline come from a real range of backgrounds and experiences, and so are able to support people on these wide range of issues. Just a bit more in depth about those services. It's completely anonymous, confidential, and non-judgmental. That's the nature of the helpline. It's completely free, and it's run by highly trained and paid professional staff. So there are loads and loads of support services out there. CALM chose to make its helpline, as opposed to say a volunteer helpline, of which there are lots of brilliant ones. We chose to make it a paid professional staffed helpline from people who come from a range of backgrounds, including counselling and social work and youth work and things like that. So they come with a real wealth of knowledge themselves. But then in addition to that, they gain really in-depth training with CALM before they start working for us on issues around such as suicide. So they're specialists in the area itself. It's non-clinical advice. So we're well aware of the importance of speaking to a GP, for example, and formalized support through that way. As I've said, CALM tries to take an approach which captures people who may want something slightly different, people who don't necessarily speak using clinical medical language, which, like I say, works for a lot of people, but might not work for everyone. So if you're looking for something a little bit different, CALM could be the right thing for you. We're interventionists when needed. So as I was saying about people who call at the point of crisis, the helpline staff are very well experienced in dealing with people at that point. And so if needed, we'll engage with emergency services where necessary. So if someone is in immediate danger and wanting to remove themselves from that position, our helpline staff are really experienced in working with them in that moment and engaging 999 where necessary. But not all of the calls are like that, and it is a minority of the calls. So we're really there. The majority of our calls are supporting people who are not at that absolute crisis point. and it's completely open to everyone. So as Maurice was asking before about being a nationwide charity, we're really here for anyone in terms of gender, any other demographics, specifically rural and urban. We support people who are 15 and over, essentially. So people, young farmers, people who are in their farming career, retired, people who are elderly, anyone who needs our support and thinks it's right for them, both through the phone helpline, if they have access to the web chat as well, but also through our online content. So as Maurice was saying, there's loads of information on our website, specific pages around certain issues, which people are also really welcome to check out and have a read of as well if you prefer to engage that way. So there's lots of different types of support available to you. Just some numbers on the sort of help that we provide. So we don't have our 2020 stats yet, but in 2019 we answered 120,000 calls and web chats from various people contacting us, and directly prevented 588 suicides, which is, obviously it's tragic that was necessary, but it's also amazing that our support services were there to do that for the people who needed it. And it's always a number that you're not 100% sure when each year when we see that number, if it goes up or down, you're not necessarily sure if that's a good sign. Obviously you want to prevent more suicides, but also you don't want people to get to that point, which is why, as I've said, the helpline is there for people at any point in the spectrum of how they're feeling. And ultimately we want to help people at the earliest stage possible to prevent people from getting to a point where they feel in that situation. Alongside our frontline helpline services, we do a lot of campaigning as well, nationwide, to raise awareness of the issue of suicide and mental health, ultimately to try and get people to talk with their network and to get a more nationwide conversation going. Obviously, as people have said, there's much more awareness of mental health these days, which is really important. Whether you're discussing it in a clinical or non-clinical way, that's brilliant. But we want to raise the profile of these issues so that people feel more comfortable opening up and talking about it. So ultimately they don't get to the point where they need to use a service like ours, but then the service is there for people who do need it. So more than happy to answer any questions on Calm specifically, on all of our content, and going forward as well. If anyone doesn't want to ask any questions now, I'll be really happy to have conversations with other people going forward by phone or email or any other format. Thanks very much, Maurice.
Thanks, David. And I'm glad you said that, because one of the things we can do is, if people want to get in touch, they can come direct to me. I'll pass anything on to you. Anything will be in the strictest of confidence. And we can ensure some continuity and some help and support where it's needed. One of the questions that comes up, and I've had a lot of questions put to me, and this may be appropriate for Anne, and it may be appropriate for David himself, is people say, we didn't know anything was wrong. We didn't recognise. And I've been involved in this work for some time, and it still sometimes catches me by surprise. Are there signs and symptoms that family members, that friends, that colleagues, and that people on the shoot, the people on the farm should look for and perhaps raise their eyebrows at and just think, I need to give some help, I need to make that little extra effort? Is that something you'd like to comment on, Anne?
Yes, any negative change in emotions and behaviour. But if it's somebody that you know, you'll usually know what's going on in their personal life, and perhaps you know that they've had a nasty diagnosis, for instance, or a bereavement, or something's gone wrong. It's just a matter of making enquiries and lending what support you can. Many times people appreciate practical support or just being able to talk about what's the matter more than anything else.
Which I think comes back to Susie's comment about normalising the conversation.
Yes.
I mean, traditionally in Yorkshire, extracting information about emotions is rather like trying to open a large clam with a toothpick. because
That's the stereotype, certainly.
it is. It's certainly the stereotype.
Yeah.
People with the various skills can enable people to feel comfortable and get them talking and get them to open up and get them to access support. Would there be anything you would like to add there, David?
Oh, are you speaking to me? Sorry, Maurice.
Yes, sorry.
I completely agree with Anne. I think, as you said, people who are in your network, it's about keeping an eye out for behavioural changes. It could be, unexpected mood changes, especially moods going up and down, someone becoming more socially withdrawn than you'd expect, and like I say, more so than the normal, or change in good daily routines, whether it's about sleeping or working or eating, things like that. Lacking energy. Obviously, we may all be lacking a little bit more energy at the moment because of the current context, but noticeable behavioural changes in themselves and in relation to others. Reckless behaviour as well, things like that, whether it's about consumption of substances or anger or things like that. And then more explicit signs like someone actively talking about feeling down, potentially talking about suicide, things like that, more overt signs to keep an eye out. And I think it's really important that we look out for people, obviously respecting people's privacy, but one of the things we talk about is asking twice. So how are you is a really easy question to just bat away, and it's not particularly helpful if you ask how are you and then say how are you really doing. That you've got to pick your moments. It's not always the right time to ask that question, but you definitely should look out for the people who you care about and really try to show that you're there for them and support them, because a lot of people won't want to talk about it, and understandably so, because it's difficult, but you showing that you are there and making it clear through verbal actions and otherwise will hopefully make people feel like they are supported. And it might take a bit of time, if someone, especially if they're not practiced in talking about things, you have to let people do it at their own pace, but really being clear that you are there to support people and signposting where necessary to the services you think will help is really important.
Okay, thank you very much. Helen, I have the great advantage or disadvantage of being an urban and a rural dweller. I go around urban areas and I see the loss of green in urban areas. I know that people are trying to construct them and build them in, but as soon as the first lockdown was over or was beginning to be relaxed, you where you live and me where I live were inundated with city dwellers who were coming out into the countryside to have that calming and life-affirming impact upon themselves. And there's two issues here. There was a fairly negative effect on many country dwellers there because we were picking up tonnages of litter. But do you think there's any sense in what some farmers have said to me, tongue-in-cheek, that perhaps we need to go into the cities and get a bit of civilization and get a bit of difference in our lives? Is that something anyone actually talks to you about?
Not specifically, but most people recognise how fortunate we are to live where we do. And to see on the television these poor families stuck in high-rise flats, particularly in the first lockdown when they only had an hour's exercise with families, you have to empathise with them. However, it has been immensely frustrating to have people wandering about all over and being quite aggressive, actually. A lot of farmers have been very upset by the amount of aggression and dog worrying for sheep, lambing sheep and things like that. It has been quite difficult to manage. And I think there are some areas in Scotland where they've never had as many visitors, as well as the Yorkshire Dales. It's been quite difficult to manage. But on the other hand, a friend of mine who lives in the Yorkshire Dales said, well, it's almost back to the 60s when whole families used to come up and enjoy, just splashing about in the river whereas latterly they've just jetted off abroad. So it's quite nice to see that sort of back to nature element.
So there's some adjustments that are required there with new normals.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about an expectation of new normals, and really the normal is just constantly self-adjusting, and it's going to take some time before we get stasis. Which brings me to one question. I mean, by experience and expertise, and supposedly by training, I'm a strategic planner, an operational planner, and we seem to be behind the curve on this because we're just about, and I think David might take exception with this, but we can see to that, we seem to be running catch up. And really, we should be looking at planning for 2024, 2025, because quite a number of these problems are slow burners. And it's whether or not we have the capacity, both within NHS, post-pandemic, hopefully, to be able to cope and manage, and whether or not we're putting in place plans for the future and putting in sustaining and maintaining issues. Any comments on that, David? I'll come to you next, Dan.
Sorry, Maurice, is it me you're referring?
Yeah, I'm just asking you first, and I'll come to Anne.
Oh, sorry, Billy. It's Billy.
Billy, I beg your pardon. Sorry.
It's okay. I think I can't comment as such on, say, NHS approaches or that of other organisations. Just speaking for CALM specifically in the approach that we take, I think obviously you're totally right. You know, there's these issues issues from the pandemic can be mental health issues that develop that aren't necessarily manifesting for quite a lot of time down the line. But at the same time, there is absolutely immediate support need, and there are different services that can be there to provide different functions. So for CALM, we know, because of the demand that we see each day on our helpline, that there is a need for essentially reactive services, emergency services of a form to support people like that. And that's where things like our helpline come in. Alongside that, to complement that, to try and affect long-term behavioural change and societal change and attitudinal change, we do things like campaigning to try to, as I said, bring these issues to the fore nationwide in public discourse, so that people feel more comfortable talking about it, to embed it through various channels, whether that's in the media or just day-to-day conversationally, to try to create long-term change where people feel more comfortable discussing these issues with friends and family, so that ultimately they don't need to use these immediate reactive services. There's always going to be a need for that. I think we have to acknowledge and accept that, but it's about, alongside that, putting things in place where you can create a long-term change. And that's what a lot of the things for CALM, our campaigning work does, and our grassroots work, which is about building communities that come together to do things that are beneficial for your mental health, like playing sport in teams or doing creative things. So it's the combination of the two.
Okay, thanks. Would you like to pass a comment on that, Anne?
Yes, I have great faith in the resources which people with, if I could call it, relatively minor mental health issues may access. As I said a few years ago, we didn't have IAPT, we didn't have such activity from voluntary bodies. We didn't have all the online help and support which people can access. And I very often recommend this. If you go to, for instance, the Headspace website, the Mind charity website, the Royal College website, you can find all sorts of self-help materials which are very useful indeed, and they're such a valuable first step before you may want to take anything further. And hopefully for a lot of people, these sorts of resources will suffice. It's at the sharp end, really, of mental health care that the deficits will become apparent. I think people for whom these, what we call step approaches, aren't sufficient. People with serious depression, serious suicidality. We got rid of just about all the mental health beds, actually, and there are very few psychiatrists per number of population. So my feeling is that as long as people keep seeking help, then it will be there for them. It's just overcoming that hurdle of getting people motivated and ready to and willing to engage. It's the higher up issues that I think will be quite problematic later on.
Okay, thanks. That's really interesting. Susie, you were talking initially about the campaign that RABI have and about the quite a big ground plan that you've got for moving forward. When you're developing these plans, do you talk with MPs and do you link in with statutory bodies?
Unmute myself. Yes, we haven't done in any great detail to date, if I'm completely honest. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that we just haven't had that base evidence to work with. All the information we've had really to date has been a lot of anecdotal. We all hear a lot of things, we understand a lot of things, but what we've really needed, that's why we've commissioned this piece of work, is that we really need that that base set of information from which to have a lot more conversations with these commissioning bodies and with MPs. So we hope it will be a really valuable start point, but it's by no means an end point either. It's a point in time survey that we're undertaking, but we see this as a much longer term solution, not necessarily always commissioned by us, but as an industry, we hope it will spark more interest in actually really continuing to develop a broad-based understanding across the industry of where the problems are and what we can do to support them.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll perhaps change a little bit of tack here. Sometimes when I go to country events and to places where we're working, might be monitoring, it might be managing some wildlife, it's rather like a regimental or corps meeting. Because so many of my colleagues and ex-colleagues are working in the countryside. Matt, are there organisations specifically there to help, particularly veterans? I mean, we've had a veteran living up the road in a tent for quite a while, gone through this very cold weather, but we know there are many people who are actively engaged in working in the countryside. Are there organisations that can help them that you're specifically aware of with your particular military background? And perhaps for Helen and yourself, is the strength of support within farming communities managing to maintain itself, or does that actual support network itself need helping? Perhaps if you answer the first one first, and then the second one you and Helen can talk about. Thank you, Matt.
Well, look, yeah, well, you're asking me to change tact there slightly, because I'm also a trustee of the Poppy Factory, which is provides an employment network nationwide for those with mental and physical injury, derives from my start of my career, which was spent as in the army. So there are indeed support networks. I mean, the Poppy Factory is one, but there are other charities, Combat Stress, the Royal British Legion, that do indeed provide nationwide support for veterans. If I might, though, just bring it back to a couple of the points that you've just raised as well, Maurice. I think that to come back to the long term versus the short term, I mean, I think absolute long term planning is absolutely essential for mental health and the right funding and support, and we link in absolutely to psychiatrists with the hospital trusts, for instance, with the Suffolk and Norfolk Trust and others, and also with GPs and the services provided. So I think that's key. But I think, post the vaccine rollout, we will move into an environment where we can meet face to face. And the reason I think that the challenge, although we talk about long term, the actual challenge is now, and the importance of raising awareness, because here in the immediate term, people cannot meet face to face. And the challenge is that when we look at the rural sector at the moment, we have the combination of the challenge of food pricing. So that's right across the sectors. And if you want to be BDS specific, of course, venison price, there'll be much discussion with that and the effect that has on people, their livelihoods and mental health. Brexit and trade is a big challenge, and that's still got to be worked through. We've got the new guidance on the new economic approach from Parliament in terms of what will replace the Common Agricultural Policy, but that's still got to be bedded through. And then we've got the challenges more broadly in terms of infrastructure. So we talk about political support. I contributed to the House of Lords committee on COVID-19 and a range of questions that were asked. We submitted written evidence that we were asked to do so. One of the big challenges is internet connection. So we know that businesses, all agricultural businesses, both personal and business, rely on that for a range of business and social reasons. And indeed, as technology advances within the agricultural sector, it's critical. But the thing that we've added there as a primary challenge on this point of connection and gathering is that if you don't have the rural infrastructure there, the right level of connection, you can't even connect through those means. So that's a key point, I think, in this element of connection as well.
Okay, thank you. Helen?
Yeah, well, I can underline that, can't I? Talking about veterans, one of the things that I didn't mention earlier is that one of the initiatives that we set up when we did the Raising the Game was what's called stag training, and we followed it on with hind training. And this was for gamekeepers, gillies and stalkers to talk about communication and mental health and building resilience for themselves. And we brought in the Marines to do this. And so they built the course for us and worked with us and delivered it, because who better to talk about mental health and the difficulties that they have in operation and thereafter. And it's been really, really good and worked really, really well. And there's lots of synergies as well in terms of other things that affect gamekeepers when they're no longer gamekeepers, which is, the identity. It's who they are. It's what they are. Housing, all sorts of things that have these synergies. So we were very pleased to work with them and continue to do so. And that's we're moving online with that too now. In terms of working together, well, again, Raising the Game and just working across the organisations at both ends. Just recently, I've been speaking to Jana and to Susie about her new initiative, and Anne about the things that we were doing and the lessons that we could learn. And we work daily with all the organisations to sort of get the word out there. But similarly, we all work together to support each other. And that is immensely important as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, that general message and theme about working together cooperatively, collaboratively, with a common aim here is so important, and that commonality is about community. We're beginning to come to the end of our slot here, and we don't want to overtax people. This is quite an intense session, and there's a lot that I've taken in here. There is always an interesting issue that comes out. The other day it was -10, and I was dog walking as one of the local farmers went by running at 5:30 in the morning. I thought, gosh, that's a bit extreme. We hear a huge amount about physical exercise as being good for the mind. Healthy body, healthy mind. I know that isn't always the case. But when I've talked to farmers or given advice and talked to them about slightly iffy subjects like yoga, like breathing exercises, relaxation exercises. You know, they raise their eyebrows and then go and do it privately in the barn where no one can see them. But it's quite a difficult thing to encourage people. I don't think we need to encourage that many farmers to eat well, but to exercise well is quite a hard one when you're milking cows at 5 in the morning and you're getting to bed at 9:30 and you've just about had time to have a couple of meals and go to the toilet in between. It's a very, very hard day. How can we actually get that kind of message out about the necessity to exercise? I think that might be for Billy, actually, knowing his website.
I think, exercise is for so many people a hugely important form of de-stressing, relaxation, and benefiting your mental health. I think that's very well known. People will tell you that in all sorts of settings, whether you go to your GP or if you speak to Calm or speak to other organisations. I think it's really important to say that it's about finding what's right for you, because there will be different things that work for different people, different forms of exercise, but also not just exercise, other forms of relaxation. It might be that cooking is what relaxes you, reading, or whatever it may be. It's about tapping into that and doing what works for you, because things work for different people. So don't feel necessarily like everyone's doing this one thing, everyone's doing yoga, therefore you must do yoga. Do it if it works for you, and if it doesn't, that's fine, and don't do it. So I think that's really important. Just trust that you know what's right for you, and if you're not sure, ask someone or think about it and get advice from other people on what they think would work. I think it's also about how you can factor it into your daily routine. So for example, if you have really early starts or you're doing night shifts or whatever it may be, it's finding, if you're able to, find the time to factor it in at a time that works for you as well, and really committing to that for yourself. But then at the same time, not adding an extra layer of stress and beating yourself up if you can't do it, because there'll be reasons for that, like your day just gets in the way, and that's fine as well. And acknowledging that and not saying, oh, I was going to do this 7 days a week and I've only done it 3 times this week. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. So find what's right for you and do it. But absolutely, physical exercise is a big one for a lot of people. And if you can, and if it would help, doing it with other people as well. You might find that doing physical exercise by yourself is what you need, but socially engaging with others is obviously at the moment not so easy, but when it is, it's a really good way of getting in physical exercise and social engagement as well.
Yeah, and we've got a chat that's just come up, which is from a gamekeeper, and he's dealing specifically with keepers. And he just says it's very, very difficult for them to switch off. And I have to say, most gamekeepers that I know are very clued in. They're very alert, hyper-vigilant at times. And they're doing very long physical hours. Difficult area to get people to switch off from work. And what advice do you give your keepers, Helen, for managing that sort of situation and setting? And thanks.
Can you hear me all right? Because it keeps muting.
Yep.
Is that all right? Yeah. Well, that was part of the stag course actually, and it's all part of the eating well, sleeping well, and switching off, and just having a bit of time out. If you can't get off the estate at a certain time, perhaps you can take the family for a picnic. Perhaps you can play with your little one or the dog, or do a bit of training with the dog, or anything that just makes you switch off. Just watch a lot of us at the moment are just watching a comedy at night just to switch off from this dreadful news. Just something that's different is good.
Okay, thanks, Helen. I wonder if I may, and Nick, if you're there, we have Glyn, who is the DEER officer for the BDS, who's doing a lot of educational work, who does a huge amount of educational work. I wonder, Glyn, if perhaps as we develop and we work across organisations, whether or not perhaps some of our little videos of some of the Stag and Hind kind of activities that would help Helen and perhaps go on the BDS as well as other websites.
Yeah, hi Morris. I've got no doubt that would be a good thing. You know, anything that can contribute in a positive way. You know, all ears. Let's make it happen.
And of course, that kind of program is just what I see on the Green at Harrogate when they've got the military training evenings, which of course are banned at the moment, but they do get them up there, and everybody's out there in their fine tracksuits, etc., etc. So perhaps that's something we can work on. I think it's coming up to sort of 20 to 9. We have covered a huge area. There's a lot to think about. I will draw some strands together and we will ensure we have an article in the BDS journal, but I'll also put information out to each of your organizations with your links so that we can continue the collaboration. Does anyone want to have any final comments or things that have just bubbled up while we've been sat? Susie, if I start with you, or are you okay?
I just want to thank you for inviting me here today, and just let's keep the conversation going. I think we need to be mindful of the language we use. I think that's part of what we keep talking about internally, and we need to talk about more externally, which is the language around talking about mental health is a real turn off to some people. So I think this is perhaps something we need to think about and just keep having these conversations and normalize it. Thanks,
Susie. Helen, anything you would like to add there?
Yeah, just talk to someone. But can I just mention the National Directory of Farm and Rural Support Groups, which Jana started, actually, didn't you? But is now updated by the Prince's Countryside Fund. It's got lots and lots of organisations that can help.
Okay, thank you. That's a good little one that we can perhaps publicise on our website. So I'll try and get that link and that information out to everyone, maybe even tomorrow. Anne, any last or final thoughts or reflections?
Yes, we used to talk about mental well-being in terms of the want-should ratio. And for most people who are under stress, there's too much should and not enough want. So the general idea is to spend more time doing things that you want to do and start saying no and do less of the things that you think you ought to do. But apart from that, I'll just reiterate what colleagues have said, that looking after friends and family, being aware is very important, because that's the absolute bedrock of good mental health in the community. It's a caring society.
Okay, thank you. That's a really interesting final comment. Matthew?
Thanks, Maurice. I mean, I hope we've all helped between us this evening to remove some of the stigma about talking about the mental health, and that we've flagged the full range of support that's available. And I would say to everyone, you know, at times we can all beat ourselves up too much, and we need to be kind to ourselves, particularly in this time of crisis with COVID. And I think that is really important. And I'd also emphasise what Billy said earlier around asking people if they feel okay, and then asking them again, because often that's what it might take to get somebody to say, well, actually, you know, things aren't actually as good as they may seem. And that's the point that we can all support.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. I'd just like to thank all the panel, just before I come to Billy. And there's a reason why I'm coming to Billy, because Billy's here and he's recovering from COVID. And I hope that recovery continues really well. And I really do appreciate you coming here tonight. I already know from the 2-3 phones that I have by me that I'm getting lots of questions about RABI, about Jana, about Gamekeepers Welfare Trust, about BASC, and also about CALM. So there's a significant amount of interest which is just popping up at the moment. Any final comments, Billy?
Like everyone else, I'd say really grateful for having me on to speak with all of you, and it's been really eye-opening to hear about all of the fantastic work that's going on and will continue to go on, which is brilliant. As I said, different things work for different people, and calm is something that we really believe in and we really hope helps a lot of people. So for anyone in your networks, please feel free to have a look at the sort of things we do in terms of our helpline, but also our online content and everything else. And if you think it's right for yourselves, your organizations and your members, don't hesitate to get in touch. We'd love to speak with you and support in whatever way we can, because it's really important. It's great to start that off tonight.
Thank you very, very much indeed. Okay, everyone. Well, thank you for attending the webinar. For those of you who are going to see it at another date, thank you. I'll no doubt be talking with you at some point. I will get back to all the emails that have come in and the text messages as soon as I can. In the meantime, keep well, keep safe, keep helping, keep talking, keep smiling. Thank you very much and good night.